Hello, everyone. I'm Tanja Cunz. I am a curator at the Vitra Design Museum, and I am one of the two editors of the book Objects of Desire, Surrealism and Design, 1924 to Today, which I am going to present to you today. The book was published in September 2019 in conjunction with the exhibition of the same name. The exhibition was shown at the Vitra Design Museum in Germany until January 2020 and is currently on an international tour. I did also prepare a few slides with exhibition views later, but let's first have a closer look at the book, which was designed by the British graphic designer Daniel Street. Similar to the exhibition design, which is very immersive and therefore allows the visitor to dive deep into the surrealist's imaginative world, we were aiming for a similar effect with the book, which is why we spent a lot of time on the development of the design, as we wanted to turn the book into an object of desire or a desirable object in itself, hereby also paying tribute to its title. And I saw that you are holding the book in your hand, so as you can see, it is completely red on the outside, and the fabric covering, as well as the lip relief, which is, by the way, a reference to Salvador Dali's famous lip-shaped sofa, is, well, interesting to the touch and somewhat sumptuous and sensual, while the tone of the red in combination with the golden letters gives it an elegant and classy appearance. But then, like, once you open the book, there is, I call it a wow effect caused by the very intense pink-colored end paper, which in contrast to the cover, the exterior, has a more contemporary and bold vibe, which is, by the way, also a hint that the topic of the book and the exhibition is not as historical as the subject surrealism might make you believe at first, which I will also get back to later. But first I wanted to, I'm going to share my screen with you. Here you can see, if my computer lets me, here you can see a visualization of the book again. From the outside, you can also see that the font on the cover is a sans serif, a contemporary font. And then this is the title, and you can see in the inside we switched to a serif font. And then this is the table of contents, and regarding the content of the book, it is divided into two main parts. So the first part begins with an introductory essay by Mateo Kries, who is also the main curator of the exhibition and the co-editor of the book. Unfortunately, he couldn't join us today because the German government announced a new lockdown for museums in Germany beginning on Monday, so there are lots of emergency. I hope that is fine. Essay, we have a very comprehensive image section. You can see one example here. It's comprising of approximately 200 images in which the multifaceted dialogue between surrealism and design can be discovered or experienced in an entirely visual and intuitive way by means of concise juxtapositions of art and design objects. I prepared a couple more slides to show you what I mean by that. Well, you can also already see it here. We have surrealism on the left, design on the right. Now just click through. Again, surrealism on the left, design on the right. As well as here, surrealist exhibition on the left and design on the right. That's another one. Again, surrealism on the left, design on the right. And here we have design on the left and surrealism on the right side. Yeah, and then this image section is is the first part of the book, and then the second part, you can see a slide of the second part here. It comprises of 4 richly illustrated essays by Krzysztof Fijalkowski, Claudia Marais, Vera Sacchetti and Alex Coles, in which the 4 main topics of the exhibition, which I'm also going to present to you later, are examined more in depth. And then there are also 2 short texts on peripheral themes of the exhibition written by Napoleone Ferrari and me. And first, another slide of the essay. Please note the special layout of the text. And then, there are also quotes included in the image section, quotes that are relevant to the topic from both designers and artists, as well as a catalogue of works and a selected bibliography to round off the book. Here you can see another quote from the image section. And as you might have already noticed now by going or looking at the slides, a very striking feature of the book, in addition to the cover, is the playful and experimental layout of the text. Daniel Street was very intrigued by how creatively the surrealists worked with text and language, including écriture automatique as an artistic practice, for example, and this inspired him to create the layouts that you just saw. And as already mentioned, he also works with 2 different fonts, and that's a little bit like the cover versus the end paper. We have this mixture of contemporary, modern, and more classic, and that's like in the exhibition, we have the surrealist artworks combined with also contemporary design works. Now, as already mentioned a couple of times, the book was conceived together with the exhibition Object of Desire, and the aim of both the book and the exhibition is to examine the interrelations between surrealism and design. As you can imagine, there have already been numerous exhibitions about surrealism, as it certainly is one of the most well-known and famous artistic movements of the 20th century. Furthermore, there have been a few exhibitions dedicated to examining design and surrealism in context, but these were mostly focused on design objects created by the surrealists themselves. Our exhibition, and also the book, on the other hand, goes beyond this limitation or restriction and shows the dialogue between surrealism and design in a much broader context, thereby also going beyond the core time of surrealism, which is a new approach. Now, how did we come up with this idea? First of all, Mateo Kries had been interested in the interrelations between surrealism and design for quite some time. On the one hand, also due to the before-mentioned objects conceived by the surrealists, some of which we also have in our collection. And on the other hand, and even more importantly for our project, he came across this painting by Salvador Dalí at the beginning of his research, Femme à tête de rose, from 1935. And on this painting, you can see a table a little bit in the back on the right side, which has quite striking visual similarities to the table Arabesco by the Italian designer Carlo Molino from 1950, which I also included in the slide and which we also have in our collection. And when I joined the project as an assistant curator, we began to do more in-depth research, and we found out that Carlo Molino was in fact in possession of the magazine Minotaur, which was conceived and published by the surrealists. Molino thus directly got in touch with and was inspired by surrealism, which, apart from the table you can see here, is also evident in many of his interior designs, as well as some other design objects, including the lip-shaped sofa that you can see at the bottom on the right side, which, like the cover of the book, is reminiscent again of Salvador Dalí's Mae West lip sofa from 1938. And well, this discovery made us even more curious and encouraged us to look for other designers who were influenced by surrealism. But as I already mentioned, not only from the time period when the surrealists themselves were still active and in direct contact and exchange with various designers, but also after the movement had come to an end in the 1960s. And we indeed came across many other designers up to this day who drew inspiration from surrealism in a myriad of different ways. And this is how both the book and the exhibition came into being. Now, if it's okay for you, I would just continue with the presentation because I thought it might be interesting to make it a little bit less abstract, to also introduce you to the topics discussed or shown in the exhibition, and also therefore discussed in the book, because it's an exhibition catalogue and it's like very closely connected to the exhibition. So to lay the basis for the whole topic, the first room of the exhibition, entitled The Dreams of Modernity, starts with an examination of the importance of everyday objects, hence design, within the surrealist theories and artistic practice. As you probably know, one of the surrealists' aims was to dissolve the boundaries between the inner and the external reality, and to tackle our perception of the world that surrounds us. And one way to do that was to transform everyday objects, such as the flat iron that you can see on this slide on the top at the right side, into sculptures in which the object loses its original function. Here, this happens by adding nails to the iron. And because of that, the object starts oscillating between art and design, thereby irritating and thus also encouraging us to question and ultimately also to change our established perception of reality. But then already in the second part of the first room, of which you can see an installation view here, again with the Dalí painting, we shift our attention to design, first by showing how surrealists such as Salvador Dalí got active within the field of design. You can also see a golden lamp on the plinth that was designed by him. But also then with the example of Le Corbusier, who is mostly known as one of the key figures of the so-called international style, but got in touch with surrealism when he designed this apartment for a patron and collector of surrealist art at the end of the 1920s. This section is then followed by a third chapter in which the exhibition sheds light on the enormous popularization of surrealism in the US after the Second World War, and the influence of mainly its imagery rather than its theories on American product design, architecture, interior set and graphic design, as well as fashion design. You can see a few examples here: a book cover, a table, and a set design. And all of these three topics that I just presented to you, they are all discussed in the first essay in the book. Now, after this historical prologue, the following three rooms in the exhibitions and also the following three essays in the book, they are organized thematically, and they are dedicated to the main topics that have determined the exchange between surrealism and design to this day. In the second room, entitled Image and Archetype, we demonstrate how the surrealist strategy of questioning, decontextualizing, and subverting the commonly known meaning of objects and turning them into the absurd found its way into design, especially during the counter-design movements of the 1960s and 1970s. Similar to the surrealist sculptures mentioned before, and you can see another one by René Magritte here on the slide, the designers of that time conceived objects that pretended to be something else than they actually were, and which often also had an ironic, narrative, or playful character in order to encourage us to look beyond their mere function. And you can see three examples here. These are actually all seating objects, even though they look like a hand, a piece of a plinth, and stones. This section is then followed by a chapter examining how found objects, the so-called objets trouvés, served as an inspiration for both the surrealists and designers, which is also based on a shared interest for Marcel Duchamp's ready-mades. You can clearly also see that by looking at the table at the bottom on the right side by Gaia Lenti, which has bicycle wheels as instead of regular table legs or feet. And then as an extension of the popularization of the surrealist imagery already addressed in the first room, we also incorporated design objects that drew inspiration from the visual language of the movement, such as the horse lamp from 2006 that you can see on the right side on this installation view. It's by Swedish design duo Front, and the third room of the exhibition is called Surrealism and Eroticism. Inspired by Sigmund Freud, many surrealists and also many designers dealt with the themes of love, eroticism, sexuality, and gender identity in a variety of ways. Following Freud's theory of the two opposite forces, Eros and Thanatos, the third room is also divided in two main parts. The first one visible here on this slide, and it's dedicated to the positively connotated effects of love and the fascination for and admiration of women. The second part, on the other hand, focuses on the destructive power of love, resulting in works in which the woman is objectified, oppressed, fetishized, or hypersexualized, as can be seen very well on this slide. Opposite to this are works by the female surrealists who were pioneers of feminist art and design, inspiring many female designers and artists to this day to build a strong counterpart to the male perspective. And those sections in the third room are then complemented by works that demonstrate how surrealism's examination of power and grotesque fantasies also influenced design beyond erotic and gender issues, resulting in works that refer to the uncanny, such as the teapot that you can see at the top of the slide, the teapot, or use the positive force of destruction as a means to create something new. This is exemplified, among others, in Martin Barr's project Where There's Smoke, in which he partially burns the iconic design classics such as the tonnage chair that you can see on this slide at the bottom on the right side, thereby attacking and subverting their status and meaning within design history. Now, as already briefly mentioned, the surrealists wanted to get access to the subconscious and unify it with the external reality. And in the first section of the fourth room, entitled The Savage Mind, we examine how the surrealists tried to gain access to their inner world by using various techniques involving chance and eliminating the restrictions of reason and rationality. Very similar attempts can be found in design, which resulted in completely new approaches to the design process and therefore an entirely new formal vocabulary, which becomes evident on this slide. The vase by Audrey Larche at the top right, for example, is made with a 3D printer, and the design is partially determined by the algorithm of the computer. Hence, the final shape of the object cannot entirely be controlled by the designer. In the second section, we show how the fascination for non-Western cultures and their mythical view of the world influenced both the surrealists as well as many contemporary designers, including the Brazilian brothers Humberto and Fernando Campana, for example, who created the bookshelf that you can see at the bottom on the right side, which looks like a traditional hut, but then once you open the bust curtain, it's a bookshelf. And again, the fourth room is rounded off with contemporary design objects which are referring to surrealist imagery. And it includes work such as the black sofa comprising of melting shapes by Robert Stadler, visible in the back of the installation view and also again right next to it. And it somewhat resembles the objects and the shapes and forms that you can find in Salvador Dali's and Yves Tanguy's paintings. Now, to sum up, and what hopefully became somewhat evident during the presentation, both the book and the exhibition, they aim to demonstrate how manifold the dialogue between surrealism and design was and still is. It can be an interest in a similar topic, similar artistic or creative practices in order to go beyond seemingly common ways of creation, as well as the wish to broaden and or change our view of the world by subverting common meanings and by conceiving works that go beyond mere reality, or in the case of design, beyond mere functionalism. And this shows us what a valid and fruitful source of inspiration surrealism was and continues to be for many designers. And also, especially when surrealist imagery is cited directly by designers, that this artistic movement has indeed become a part of our collective consciousness. And that would be it. I will stop the screen sharing function so that you can see me better.
Thank you very much, Tanja. So maybe
that's me. Yeah. Okay, I'm back.
Thank you. Maybe Sébastien, who have selected your book, not your book, but this book, has a lot of questions to ask you.
Yes, okay, I'll try to answer them as good as I can.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. And I think this book was very great, like as an object.
Thank you.
Who includes this kind of eroticism. So before opening it, you feel like it's just attractive, but when you go in, you take time to find, and it's very open way to be built. Because so I would have two questions. First is how did you decide to make this exhibition? Because surrealism and object is quite obvious subject, but you decide to change the perspective and start by design. So
yes.
And not only design, but you are handling with fashion and jewelry too. So it's more wide than just design. And second question is, how did you work with graphic designer? Because was it go and back very many exchange, or did you just give him all the images? And how did you decide the sequences of the image? Because at first glance, when you look the image, there is no logic. You just have más o menos one surrealistic element and one design element face to face. But sometimes you're handing about like mouse or legs, and sometimes about installation. There's no rule. So I was just wondering if it's like a free association, like in surrealism, or is there a hidden rule? So just to start. Thank you.
That's a very good question, and you're actually right. Yes. First, we were thinking of working with like juxtapositions, just as in the exhibition, but then we thought it's much more interesting to do it in a more intuitive way. We didn't want to be super didactic, and we wanted people to really, as you just said, just, go through the book and see what happens by looking at it, see which similarities you can find. It's suddenly something like associations that come into your mind, stories that start in your head, etc. And yeah, it should. We wanted it to be a little bit like surrealistic experience, and really just not too didactic but very intuitive. That was inspired by surrealism, and what we first did is, Mateo and I, we did suggest some, let's call them couples. We did make some suggestions, but then we also let the graphic designer, we let Daniel experiment by himself, because he is a fantastic graphic designer. Before he starts working on the book, he does a lot of research, and he looks at a lot of images, and he gets inspired by himself. And he's also an artist. He's a graphic designer, so artist and designer. So we also gave him quite a free hand, actually, because he came up with so many great ideas when we started to work on the book together. And he really got what we wanted, and he became very creative with the images, with the text, with the whole book, and it was a very intense collaboration, a very great collaboration. And we spend a lot of time with him and with the design in general, because as you also mentioned, we wanted it to be an object that you want to touch, you want to open it, you want to possess it, an intriguing object, also thereby paying tribute to the surrealist's obsession with the object. So like the desire is not meant in an erotic way only. Of course, the red and the lip, they somewhat also will make you believe that it's this way, but that's like only, let's say, the first level, but then it really goes beyond that. It's the fascination and the adoration of the object, how they work with object, the importance the object had in the surrealist theory and practice. And then, of course, also in design, the object is something very important. And all the objects that were created also based on the inspiration by surrealism, they also create some kind of a desire in you when you look at them, because they're not just functional, they do so much more to you and with you. So that's also how we came up with the title of the book. And then why the perspective, your first question? Well, we are a design museum. We're not an art museum, even though we did another exhibition with art. It was pop art design. But for us, of course, it was logical to have this perspective. And at the beginning, it was more an interest that Mateo had, and he found this, this Molino table and the Dali painting, and we did the research, and that was also quite intuitive. And I can remember that when we started working on the exhibition, that also we took objects from the collection that we thought they might fit. And I knew quite a bit about surrealism because I'm a classical art historian, Mateo as well. So we just also started to make combinations, and then once the research gets more intense and you start to read more, then you discover more and more and more. So we went more and more and more to the contemporary time, and we spoke with designers like Robert Stadler, but then also Björk, Iris van Herpen. There are so many who still find inspiration in surrealism, and that was very interesting. So that's in the end how it happened, but it was a very interesting and intuitive process as well. Actually, we didn't at first think that we would find so many contemporary works that match or go well with this topic. But I mean, for us as a design museum, that is, or in general as an institution, as an educational institution, we do not only want to make exhibitions about things that have already happened in the past and they are done. We want it to be actual, it needs to have an importance now. Like, why are we showing this topic? We do not only want to show something that is pretty, nice to look at. We want it to be relevant somehow. And we noticed that there is still the minimal approach in design, which is very common, very popular. But then there are all these objects recently, last 10 years, still now, that are not only functional, they are so much more. And when you start digging, and some of them were inspired also by surrealism, we found this relevance, the relevance for today, and that was also important to us.
Thank you. So we have 2 members of the jury here. Do you have some question, Franck, Bertrand? Okay.
Tanja, bravo. My question, I have no question. I wanted just to say to you, the work of the book, the documentation is fantastic.
Thank you so much.
It's really au-delà, beyond only just surrealism and design. I would say the book is a kind of a mood board, a mental mood board for the 20th century with objects.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. It's very, I think for me, I'm sure the book is stronger even than the exhibition. You create a universal mood board of the 20th century.
Thank you
with
so
form,
much.
desire, imaginary. Okay,
Thank you.
that's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, that's a very great compliment.
See you
I'll
in-
share with
see-
Mateo.
See you in Basel.
Sébastien, could you precise again why you have chosen this book, especially between younger?
Yeah, first the question was FILAF is about it's a prize for art book, and it includes all the elements, the design of the book, content of the book, and originality of the book, and pedagogical aspect of the book. And I think this book gather all these elements. This object is quite the most perfect I've seen in all the book published this last year. And you have a first text who is very clear from Mateo Kries, who makes a review of all the topics about design and surrealism. But you have then more specific text, or more research text, and some very precise text. So you have all the, you can get all the levels of interest in this book. So it's very interesting for me. And yeah, so you have all, and it's a real scientific book. So you can, if you're not a specialist of this subject, you can find interest. But if you are interested in this subject, you find elements that are new for this. And I don't know how long did you work on this, but I think at least 2 or 3 years. So I can feel there's quite and as Frank says, I think it's more you have much more elements than in the exhibition, and you even find it's like a Bible for me. I don't know if it's a seminal book of the 20th century books, but yeah, you have so many elements. You can read by both all the way, and the face-to-face images that you install makes that you invent some histories about the works. And yeah, and the thing is to I think to cross how do you say les domaines, the fields. Yeah, it's quite important now not to keep on art or design, and you really cross all the fields, and this freedom is very important for me. So I think yeah, you get many of the goals. And first I didn't select this book because it was like a silent book, a small book, but at the time I have like many months to reflect about which book will be my favorite, and finally I found this one resisted more at the time. So it's very profound books, and so it's why I chose it.
Thank you so much. That is very flattering to hear. We actually did it in 1.5 years.
Okay.
And the book like a little bit less even, but very intensively, which is sometimes even better, short but intense. Yeah, and like crossing the boundaries and art design, like fluid borders also, that was important to us.
It's not a boring book, so yeah, because it's not you have not so much rules, and so you can go away and forth and back, and so it's the subject is very scientific, but you can just change the pages, and there's so many confrontation, and so you understand how much the surrealists were very involved in the everyday life. So it's a point very important for me for surrealism. They're not just artists who are just working on dream, but they are very implicated in the everyday life, and even in the capitalist system. They were against, but they produce objects, and they take objects from the country. And there is a very interesting idea for me. It's to start with the Fountain of Duchamp, because at least the most famous artwork of the 20th century is just a design element, and so it's like just it says everything for me. Yeah,
that's very true. Yeah. And we also like at the beginning, because it is a scientific book, and so at the beginning we weren't sure if we could be so creative with how it's designed. But in the end, we think because of this topic, it works very well. But of course, normally scientific books, they look much more strict, whereas purely exhibition catalogs might be a little bit more playful. But this book is really, in the end, it's like a synthesis or a mixture of both. And I think it's also because of the topic that it works so well.
But maybe to conclude, I wanted to ask you, do you want it also to make a link with the present time? Because surrealism was creating in a difficult time between two wars, and we know that we live in a very difficult times. Maybe it wasn't the topic at the beginning of the exhibition and the book, but finally, this is something specific between surrealism and nowadays.
Yes, I mean, we have one installation also in the exhibition, which it's by Dunn and Raby, and it comprises of objects that we might need once there is not enough food and resources anymore on the planet, that we might need to nourish ourselves to survive. That's very dystopian. And surrealism also had a rather dystopian view of the world, and of course also because of the First World War, and because the entire society broke down, and because all the beliefs were shattered. And I think their practice, their theories, has a lot to do with the context of their time, and what has happened then, and in which kind of world they lived. And also nowadays, I mean, a designer can never distance him or herself from what's going on in the world. And I think also objects that are not just purely functional, objects that are created now, they are also maybe mirroring that we are looking for different ways. We are creating different objects that can give you something else than just serving you as a glass or a table or a dress or whatever. Object, just as I like the Dunn and Raby installation that I meant, fictional objects actually, but that can become reality, that confront you with a reality or a future reality. So I guess, the time always has an influence, and that's also a link that we can maybe make between surrealism and some of the contemporary design works that we have in the exhibition.
I would say, Tanja, the secret link, because, surrealism, design, it's very banal, classical subject, but both, they have in common a secret link, which is to reinvent the life. And it's a message of freedom, love and desire is revolutionary in surrealism, and design wanted also not to put some functional object, but reinvent the current day life. So it's a very, in this difficult and strange period, this book is a wonderful message of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you.
So thank you, Frank, for this wonderful conclusion. Thank you, Tanja, and thank you, Sébastien. Very well. Goodbye. Have a nice evening. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Thank you so much.